I'd say, hey, I don't know much about this political race, and they'd go Google him and find almost nothing. Whereas they would see my yard sign and it would say mackinward7.com, and they could go type that in and all of my positions were right there. So it made it easy to drive traffic to the website, which is what I wanted.
Yeah, I've talked on this podcast before about how I remember every single political yard sign that all my neighbors and all the people on my street have put up. Yeah. And I like react to them based on their past history of political signs. So people do pay attention to them.
Yep.
People do appreciate them.
One thing I thought was really funny in this election was sort of the yard sign juxtapositions we would get. So there's 15 seats in Waltham. 9 of them are ward seats, and 7 of them are at large. And towards the end of the campaign, people were starting to sort of factionalize of like the progressive Waltham endorsements. You would tend to see those signs clumped together. And then the education group, Waltham Citizens for Education, had their endorsements, and so you would see those signs clumped together. And then we started getting these like weird crossovers between people who were endorsed for school committee, who would tend to get clumped with one or the other, and in some yards you would see them arranged differently. It was all very funny. Maybe I thought too much about it in the last weeks of the campaign when I was losing my mind, but it was interesting to see the yard sign jostling for position.
I just wanted to follow up really quickly about something you had said earlier. You had mentioned that the Waltham progressives had sort of boosted your signal on social media. Could you talk a little bit about how social media factored into your campaign overall?
I went in with the intention to get as much out of social media as I could. And so I had a Facebook page that I was posting to at least once a week. And I tried to put things on it that people would relate to. Every time I was out canvassing a neighborhood, I tried to get a picture with something distinct in that neighborhood to show that I was really working hard on canvassing all of Waltham and not just certain specific areas. And then I had a Twitter profile where I would live tweet when I showed up at city council meetings, like, hey, the city council just voted on this. Here's my position on this issue. And then both of those linked back to my website. And I used a lot of video content, which I think had a huge impact, based on the Facebook hits at least, is people really strongly engaged with the video I was putting out. And I had the videos up on YouTube as well. Somebody told me it's like the #2 search engine in the US is YouTube. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what I was told.
Side note, you can get our podcast on YouTube.
Hey!
Because I have heard the same thing.
Yeah, and I like that on YouTube, just like on Facebook, you can see the number of people that have watched it. Whereas on Twitter, you only know who are seeing your tweet if they're interacting with it, retweeting or liking. And my strategy for most of the social media was to try to drive people to the website as much as I could, because that's where I could shape the message a lot better, whereas Facebook and Twitter both have these arbitrary limitations. And YouTube is video only, whereas I feel like I express myself better in writing than I do on film. But since the social media is free, I wasn't buying ads on any of those platforms. It, for me, was really a way to help hit the message every platform that I could. And it really was a big contrast between some of the incumbents in the race who had no social media profiles at all. And it also made it easy for progressive Waltham. When I tweeted something interesting, they would retweet it and say, hey, one of our candidates says this. And it made it easy to cross-promote with other races, where somebody running at large would post a video and they'd say, hey, this is a really cool video. Here's a position from one of our other endorsed candidates. So there was a lot of networking and cooperation going on thanks to them.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about just sort of how much of a time commitment is running for office. What did your weeks look like?
In May and June, I was doing 1 weeknight for an hour or 2 hours, and then one weekend for 2 to 3 hours with one volunteer, typically. I slowed down a lot in July and August, but I would go typically 1 weeknight after work for 2-ish hours when the sun was up late, and then one weekend if I could for 2 hours. But my husband and I did a lot of hiking this summer, so some weekends we were totally out. Then once school started up again and hiking season was winding down, I ramped it up to 3 to 4 times a week, where for a while it was 6 hours on weekends, and then I boosted it up to 8 hours on weekends, and it was 2 hours once a week, and then in October boosted up the weeknights to be more like 1.5 hours twice a week as the nights started coming on sooner. So it's a lot, especially if you're trying to manage the website and the social media and showing up to the current city council meetings. I honestly couldn't tell you how many hours a week I was putting in, just that it was a lot. And it was really hard to manage my schedule for a while. Yeah, I did some interviews with 2 young women who were taking a class at Brandeis University on women in politics. And one of the things they asked me is, do you think it would have been easier to run for office as a man? And what I said was, not right now, it wouldn't have been. But if I'd been running as a man in the 50s and I had a wife and I could have said, you take care of 100% of the home stuff while I campaign, that would have been so much easier. But it was really important to me not to say like, hey, husband, you get to take care of 100% of the home stuff, because that's not fair. There was just a lot going on every day, plus my full-time job. So you can do it. All of the other women who got endorsed by Progressive Waltham have children in their lives, and they worked just as hard as I did while simultaneously managing all of the home stuff, full-time jobs for all of them and their kids. So you can do it. We can do it. Women who have kids can do it. But I'm not going to lie, it was tough. It was tough.
And it sounds like then there's a good opportunity for women who don't themselves want to run for office but want to support this effort, that if you want to be like the social media manager for someone who's running for office or something, that could really help women like you who are running, that could take some of that burden off of your campaigning.
Yes, absolutely. The biggest lifesaver for me was in early October. One of the races in Waltham that Progressive Waltham had endorsed, it became pretty clear that our endorsed candidate, who was the incumbent, was going to hold on to his seat. So they took a woman who had been managing his volunteers and moved her over to me, and she totally saved my sanity. I said, look, here are the email addresses of everybody I've talked to about volunteering. Set up a schedule, just take care of it. And she did. It was phenomenal. And she, I think, has an 18-month-old, works full time, and had enough time in her schedule where she could just field emails for me and put everybody who was coming out for a specific time slot on a Google spreadsheet. And it was so easy. I just had to check the spreadsheet and say, okay, who's volunteering with me tonight? Great. I don't have to worry about it. It was an enormous help. So even people who only have a limited amount of time, or who don't want to knock on doors, or who can't give financially, there's stuff that you can be doing for candidates, especially in these little local races where there's not some big paid apparatus and they don't have a state party behind them. There's always something that the candidate can give to you to do for them.
So you had mentioned talking to some people at Brandeis about whether or not it would be easier for you to run as a man.
Yeah.
Can you tell us if you think you did experience or see any sexism on the campaign trail?
I did. And you know what? I have mixed feelings about it, because most of it was low-key sorts of things that I was expecting, where I'd roll up to somebody's door and I'm running for office, and they'd say, great, how many kids do you have? And I'd be like, I have no kids. Because it's so expected that women only get in politics because they want to do something for their children, which is a great reason to get involved, but it wasn't why I was doing it. And then I thought I was really prepared for the kinds of snark that women get when they get into politics about their appearance and about how smart they are. And then something happened that I heard about through the grapevine, and it hit me a lot harder than I was expecting, where somebody was overheard making a crack about how attractive I was or not at a community event. And I was really surprised how rough it was emotionally to get over that moment, where I had to take a step back and say, look, I'm not doing this to prove anything. I'm not doing this just because I am a woman. I'm smart and I'm talented and I'm capable. Can we please talk about my ideas? And that was rough, but I bounced back fairly quickly. And I don't know if men ever get comments that hit them like that, if there's other things that get thrown at them that are hurtful and they have to just push through and move on. Yeah, and it sucked, but I got over it. And the campaign was, I think, for me, always about what the issues are, not about, oh, I'm a woman and therefore I'm going to be good for this. It was just about, here are my ideas. I hope you think they're good ideas and you'll consider voting for me.
Did you feel like you needed to dress in a certain way to be taken seriously?
Yes. I wanted to walk a line between too casual and too formal. And for men, it's really easy. You get up and you put on slacks and a collared shirt and you roll with that. And I'm glad that I work in a business casual office because that meant I had a lot of options. But every time I went out to an event or something, there was a part of me thinking, like, is this a dress event or is this a slacks event? Like, is this a sandals event or is this a closed-toed shoes event? And I think I wore pants like 80% of the time, partly because I needed pockets. I needed pockets to keep my car keys in. I think it's a little bit easier for men because they have that default uniform. So you can sell it as an advantage for women that we have a little more flexibility in how we dress, but it's also a disadvantage because people are so quick to judge based on how you're dressed. And it's a little bit of your brain power that gets occupied making that choice every day instead of thinking about email strategy or your policy position on whatever it is.
Yeah, when we interviewed Claire from She Should Run, she said one of the questions somebody brought up at some point was that a donor wanted to give a pool party, and the candidate was like,
boy.
What do I wear to a pool party?
Wow. Yeah, wow. There's 2 women on the city council right now that I've kind of been watching how they dress for stuff, and one of them wears a black pantsuit every week, very formal, and the other one has served on the council for 42 years and wears whatever the heck she feels like.
That would be me. That would be my option.
Yeah.
Because I am not very good at looking nice.
Yeah.
What would you say the biggest surprise was of your campaign?
That's tough because so many individual things were so surprising. I think the biggest surprise was how emotional the whole thing was. One of the big issues in Waltham right now is about building a new high school. And so a lot of my ward is younger homeowners who are really invested in getting this new high school built so that their kids can have a state-of-the-art education. And that effort's really been driven predominantly by the mothers. And it was so fantastic for me to have the experience of having so many women come out to support my campaign. I had a handful of men who volunteered and were really dedicated. They're probably going to listen to this podcast, and I really sincerely appreciate them. But having other women come out to support me was enormous. It was a big ego boost and an emotional lift. And then having, I mentioned earlier, the little cohort of progressive Waltham endorsed women, we really leaned on each other a lot and had a running group thread the whole time. And it was important to me to have their support and to have little venting sessions with them. It was nice to have a group that was so comfortable, and I wasn't expecting to feel so much a part of a team when I signed up to run. And then the day of the election, I was out holding signs outside my polling place, and most of the people who came out to hold signs during the day were mothers who brought their little daughters with. And then when I won, it didn't really hit me until the next morning. And then I saw a bunch of photos on Facebook of them with their little girls holding signs with me. And the thing that shocked me the most was I didn't tear up or anything or get emotional on an election night, but I did the next day when it sort of hit me how big of a privilege I have that I get to show all the little girls in Waltham what it looks like when women run for office and win, and how we can change things when we have a seat at the table. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be that much of an emotional ride, but it really was, and it was really powerful, and it makes me feel like I'm standing up for something important, that all of the young girls and young women can see what it looks like when women get to participate.
Yeah, in some ways it's so shocking that we're in 2017, nearly 2018, and that's still a thing.
Yep.
But
we doubled the number of women on the council. It went from 2 out of 15 to 4 out of 15.
Wow. But yeah, no, it clearly is still a thing. And And that is so great that you get to show those girls, and not just the girls, but